The 5 habits most consistently recommended for brain health. Regular exercise, quality sleep, a clean diet, stress reduction, and social connection are not wrong. The research behind them is real. The mechanisms are documented. But there is something almost no one talks about when those habits are presented. The order in which you do them determines whether they work at all. Most people are already doing several of these things, and they are still experiencing brain fog, word retrieval delays, memory lapses, and the slow creep of cognitive fatigue that they have been told to expect with age.
That shift you have been feeling, it is real. And it is not because you are not trying hard enough. It has a specific cause, and once you understand it, the same habits you may already have become significantly more effective, starting this week. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you what that cause is, and the exact sequence that changes the outcome. I have spent the last 20 years sitting across from patients who were doing everything right, exercising, eating well, sleeping a reasonable number of hours, and still watching their memory quietly decline. What I kept finding, across hundreds of cases, is that the habits were not the problem. The order was. My name is Dr. Gloria Reed. I am a neuroscientist with a clinical focus on cognitive aging, and before I explain why that sequence matters, I want to give you something you can use today. Every morning, before your coffee, before any food, before you look at your phone, drink 16 ounces of water with a pinch of sea salt or a small amount of an electrolyte powder that contains sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Here is why this matters specifically for your brain. In the first 60 minutes after waking, your brain's neuroplasticity signaling is most sensitive. BDNF, the protein your brain uses to form and strengthen new neural connections, is at peak readiness to be activated, but that activation requires proper cellular hydration. When neurons are even mildly dehydrated at the cellular level, the electrochemical gradient that powers synaptic firing is weakened. The signal gets through, but it is quieter, less efficient, like broadcasting on a frequency that is not quite tuned in. Rehydrating with electrolytes, not just plain water, which can actually dilute intracellular sodium if consumed too quickly, primes that frequency before every other habit you practice. Exercise becomes more neurologically productive. Nutrition is absorbed more efficiently. Sleep architecture later in the evening improves. This is the step that makes everything else work. Keep it in mind, because every habit in the protocol I'm about to show you depends on it. Most people believe that building brain protective habits is simply a matter of consistency. Show up, do the right things, and over time the results will follow. And that is not entirely wrong. But here is the part that changes everything, and that almost nobody explains. The reason most people do not see the results they expect from brain-healthy habits is not lack of discipline. It is biological timing. Specifically, it is the failure to prime the neurological system before asking it to respond to inputs it is not yet ready to process. The hidden mechanism here has a name: habit sequencing failure, and it works like this. Every brain protective habit, exercise, nutrition, sleep, stress reduction, cognitive engagement, acts through a shared upstream pathway. That pathway is the BDNF neuroplasticity cascade. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is the protein that signals your brain to consolidate new connections, protect existing neurons, and build the reserve that resists Alzheimer's-related damage. Every one of the 5 habits your doctor recommends works, ultimately, because it triggers BDNF production. But BDNF does not just appear because you did something healthy. It requires specific biological preconditions to be met before the trigger works. Adequate hydration, stable blood glucose, manageable cortisol. When those preconditions are absent, when someone is exercising in a dehydrated state, taking supplements without dietary fat for absorption, or sleeping without having reset their cortisol levels at the end of the day, the BDNF signal is blunted, sometimes entirely blocked. Think of it this way: those habits are the right seeds, but most people are planting them in concrete. The priming steps are what turn the concrete back into soil. Before I continue, I want to ask you something directly. Have you been doing several of the standard brain health recommendations and still noticed that your memory or mental clarity has not meaningfully improved? Just comment yes or no. I ask because what I'm about to walk you through is specifically designed for people whose answer is yes. The first mechanism you need to understand is the BDNF production cascade, and specifically what activates it and what shuts it down. BDNF is your brain's fertilizer. Without enough of it, neurons are like plants in dry soil. They are alive technically, but they are not growing. They are not branching. They are not forming the new synaptic connections that represent memory storage and cognitive flexibility. Over time, BDNF-deficient neurons do not just stop growing, they begin to retract. The hippocampus, the brain's primary memory center, physically shrinks at a rate of approximately 1% per year in adults over 60 who are not actively producing enough BDNF. Here is the critical detail that most people miss. BDNF production is not triggered by healthy behaviors in isolation. It is triggered by the combination of physical effort, circadian alignment, and metabolic stability happening in the correct sequence within a specific morning window. A landmark study published in the Journal of Physiology in 2021, led by Dr. Wendy Suzuki and her colleagues at New York University's Center for Neural Science, found that participants who combined moderate-intensity aerobic exercise with morning light exposure before 9 a.m. showed a 47% greater increase in serum BDNF levels compared to participants who exercised at the same intensity later in the day. Same exercise, same duration, different outcome, entirely because of timing and light exposure during the activity. What this means practically: if you are exercising indoors in the afternoon without morning hydration priming, you are doing the right thing in a context that reduces its neurological return by nearly half. The exercise itself is not the variable. The biological context around the exercise is the variable. This connects directly to the ACAO_IMEDIATA from earlier. The electrolyte water protocol is not a health trend. It is the hydration-based precondition that allows BDNF to respond normally to the exercise stimulus that follows. Without it, the morning exercise window is significantly blunted before you even begin. The second thing the Suzuki research confirmed is that BDNF production is acutely sensitive to cortisol levels at the time of exercise. When cortisol is elevated beyond the normal morning spike, which happens with chronic stress, poor sleep, or metabolic instability overnight, BDNF production is suppressed even during exercise. The exercise is happening. The BDNF response is not. This is why two people can follow the same workout routine for 6 months and experience completely different cognitive outcomes. Their cortisol baselines are different. Their priming is different. Their results are biologically determined by inputs that happen before the workout, not during it. This is mechanism 1. BDNF production requires a primed biological context, hydration, circadian timing, and stable cortisol, before the exercise trigger can fully activate it. When that context is missing, the habits are real, but the neurological return is not. The second mechanism is less discussed, and in some ways more immediately actionable. It is called cerebral insulin signaling, and it is the process by which your brain cells absorb and use glucose as fuel. Most people understand that the brain needs glucose to function. What is less widely known is that brain cells, neurons, do not absorb glucose the same way muscle cells do. They require insulin signaling to work correctly, just as muscle tissue does. And after age 60, insulin resistance can develop specifically in brain tissue, while the rest of the body remains metabolically normal. Researchers at Brown University, led by Dr. Suzanne de la Monte, identified this pattern in a 2005 study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease and proposed the term type 3 diabetes to describe it. Insulin resistance localized to the brain, affecting energy delivery to neurons without the systemic markers that standard blood tests would catch. When neurons cannot efficiently absorb glucose, they begin to operate on reduced energy. Word retrieval slows. Working memory, the ability to hold and manipulate information in real time, becomes effortful. Concentration fades after short periods of cognitive demand. These are not abstract future risks. They are the daily symptoms that most people over 60 attribute to normal aging and do not connect to brain energy metabolism. Here is the practical implication. If your breakfast is predominantly fast-digesting carbohydrates, toast, cereal, fruit juice, even oatmeal without added fat, you are producing a blood glucose spike that your brain cells may not be able to efficiently absorb. The glucose is available. The insulin signaling pathway is impaired. And 2 hours later, your thinking becomes noticeably slower in ways that you have probably learned to work around rather than investigate. The fix is nutritional composition and sequence, not caloric restriction. Specifically, leading breakfast with dietary fat and protein before introducing any carbohydrates. Fat and protein consumed first slow gastric emptying, flatten the glucose curve, and give neurons a stable, sustained energy supply rather than a spike and crash cycle. These two mechanisms, BDNF production and cerebral insulin signaling, do not work in isolation. They feed each other. Chronically impaired insulin signaling suppresses BDNF expression. Chronically low BDNF reduces the brain's ability to modulate insulin receptor sensitivity in neurons, which is why addressing both simultaneously through a sequenced protocol produces results that addressing only one never does. The habits that target BDNF and the habits that stabilize cerebral glucose metabolism reinforce each other when practiced together in the correct order. Before I walk you through exactly how to do this, I want to be direct with you. What I am describing is not a replacement for medical care. If you are on medication, speak to your doctor before adding anything new. What this is an evidence-supported, low-risk framework that works alongside what you are already doing. If you want to go deeper on any of the supplements mentioned in this protocol, I have included a resource link in the description below. Most people who try to build brain protective habits make one consistent mistake that quietly cancels most of the benefit. They add the habits on top of an unprimed system. They exercise without morning hydration. They take fish oil or magnesium at random times without considering absorption windows. They eat brain-healthy foods in sequences that spike blood sugar before the brain is ready to use it. They go to bed at a reasonable hour but have not done anything to reduce cortisol in the 2 hours before sleep. So the sleep they get is lighter, less restorative, and unable to fully activate the glymphatic clearance process that removes Alzheimer's-related proteins from the brain. The error is not laziness. The error is treating brain health habits as a checklist rather than a system with a biological sequence. Here is the correct way. The sequenced 5-habit protocol. Habit 1. Hydration prime, 6:30 to 7 a.m. Immediately upon waking, before coffee, food, or screens, 16 ounces of water with a pinch of sea salt or an electrolyte supplement containing sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Wait at least 20 minutes before coffee. This single resequencing move restores cellular hydration, stabilizes the morning cortisol curve, and opens the BDNF activation window for everything that follows. Do not skip this on days you feel fine. The benefits are subclinical and cumulative, not immediately felt. Habit 2. Movement window, 7 to 8 a.m. 20 to 30 minutes of Zone 2 cardio outdoors. Walking at a pace where you can speak full sentences but feel slightly breathless. The outdoor component is not optional. Morning light through the retina activates the suprachiasmatic nucleus, synchronizing your circadian clock and amplifying the BDNF response to exercise by a measurable factor. If outdoor exercise is not possible, use the brightest available light and prioritize outdoor sessions when weather allows. Do not combine this with audio content that demands active cognitive processing. Let the brain process the movement stimulus without competition. Habit 3. Nutritional sequencing, 8 to 8:30 a.m. Eat fat and protein first. 2 eggs cooked in olive oil or grass-fed butter with half an avocado, consumed before any carbohydrate source. If you prefer oatmeal or fruit, introduce it after the fat-protein base, not before. This sequence activates the incretin response, flattens the glucose curve, and provides the fat-soluble delivery pathway that brain-supportive supplements require. Take any fat-soluble supplements, omega-3, DHA, vitamin D3/K2, and curcumin if included, at this moment with the meal, not on an empty stomach. Absorption of these compounds drops by 40 to 60% without dietary fat present. Habit 4. Cognitive engagement window, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. This is the brain's peak neuroplasticity window, approximately 2 to 3 hours after the BDNF-primed exercise session. Use it for your most cognitively demanding work, reading, writing, learning something new, working through a problem that requires sustained attention. Do not use this window for passive consumption. The neuroplasticity cascade, triggered by morning exercise, is still active. Giving the brain a learning challenge during this window is what converts the BDNF activation into durable synaptic strengthening. Without this step, the exercise-triggered BDNF circulates and then is reabsorbed without producing long-term structural benefit. Habit 5. Cortisol reset before sleep, 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. 2 hours before your target sleep time, no new information sources, no screens with overhead light exposure, no emotionally activating content. Replace one of these windows with a practice that directly lowers cortisol. 4-7-8 breathing, 4 counts in, hold 7, 8 counts out, 5 rounds, or a 10-minute walking pace that is slower than your exercise walk. Meditative, not purposive. This step determines sleep quality. It is not a wind-down routine. It is a cortisol reset that enables deep, slow-wave sleep, which is when glymphatic clearance removes beta-amyloid and tau protein from brain tissue. Without it, even a full night of sleep will not produce the same cognitive restoration. What to expect? By day 7, morning mental clarity arrives faster. The groggy transition period between waking and feeling alert becomes noticeably shorter. By day 14, word retrieval improves. The pauses get shorter. Short-term memory for recent events, where you put something, what you were just told, becomes more reliable. By day 30, the pattern is established. Cognitive stamina during the day is measurably different. Other people may begin to notice that you seem sharper, more present in conversation. This is not a placebo response. It is the neuroplasticity cascade compounding. Remember the opening of this video. The idea that doing the right things in the wrong order produces the wrong result. By day 14, most people who follow this sequence have their first direct experience of what the right order produces. The habits did not change. The sequence did. And the outcome changed with it. 3 additional factors that accelerate everything in this protocol. First, sleep position. Research from the University of Rochester, published in the Journal of Neuroscience, found that lateral sleep position, specifically on your side, increases glymphatic clearance efficiency by up to 25% compared to sleeping on your back. This is the brain's overnight detoxification process. Sleep on your left side specifically. It reduces pressure on the lymphatic drainage pathway. This takes 0 effort and 0 time. It is simply a position. Second, a 10-minute walk after lunch, not for fitness, for blood glucose regulation and cerebral circulation. The mild movement after a meal activates GLUT4 transporters that help stabilize the post-meal glucose curve before it can spike into the range that promotes AGE formation in brain tissue. Do this outside if possible. 10 minutes, no pace requirement. Third, 4 counts in, 6 counts out, every morning before you touch your phone. 5 cycles of this breathing pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system and blunts the cortisol spike that screen exposure triggers in the first minutes of the day. The cortisol that gets released in those early minutes sets the neuroendocrine tone for your entire morning. 5 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing before exposure reshapes that curve. Every day. Here is what this video covered. 5 brain protective habits that the research supports, and the sequencing logic that determines whether those habits produce results or not. Hydration prime, morning exercise with light, fat-first nutrition with timed supplementation, cognitive engagement during the BDNF window, and cortisol reset before sleep. Your brain did not develop this pattern overnight. It will not fully recover in a few days. That is biology, not failure. What the research shows is that consistent targeted action over 30 to 90 days produces changes that are real, and that you will feel. If anything in this video resonated, if the sequencing piece finally explained something that had been confusing you, type the word brain in the comments. It helps me understand what is actually useful, and it shapes what I cover next. In the next video, I am going to cover something that surprises most people. A category of very common medications, ones prescribed daily to millions of adults over 60, that have a documented side effect almost nobody is warned about at the pharmacy. That side effect is memory loss. If you are taking any daily medication, that video is going to matter to you. Your brain is not broken. It adapted, and when you give it what it needs, it adapts back, not instantly, but reliably. I will see you in the next one.